Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Akibatun lil mustaqim wa la ufwana ila ala dalimeen. Wa Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu ta'ala wa salamu alayhi. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullah barakatuh lil ikhwani ikhwati fi deen. Wa salamu ala mani tabahuda lil ikhwani ikhwati fi Africa, Europa, America, Caribbean, wa kulli makan. Highly wa salim bikum. Andarama to my African brothers and sisters everywhere you may be, and those who are friends and protectors of the African people. Well, my dear brothers and sisters, to be honest with you, I've haggled with this topic at hand because it's very, how can I say, we have lived for centuries with a false notion, and this includes the Tubab, the Jews, as we know Jews today, and the Africans, and all those who follow Christianity. And it's the evidence is so overwhelming that this is why those who dare to write about it have been harmed. A lot have been harmed, others were threatened, and so forth and so on. And I'm going to present to you today a picture of what actually happened and who the Jews were and the Hebrews were and how they became that. But again, we go back to the African continent because Egypt is ours. And you have to include the Jews and Hebrews because this is part of the legacy of Egypt. And it's a black legacy on top of that, which I'll get into. If you saw my marquee, this here is very telling. This, you remember here, I think last week I had a guy come on, he fought us in the chat room about, the Egyptians, ancient Kemites came from other places, not from Africa. And I told him, he didn't look at my program. He didn't bother to look at my program. And then he was a troll. He started to try to say that I said that the L series and the E series are the same, which I never said that, and so forth and so on. Again, I put this up, brothers and sisters, because I want to show you again, when you talk about West Africa, you must include Egypt, ancient Egypt or Kemt. You must include them. Because this is something that here again, the migration from Kemt to West Africa. And you can't have royal mummies and population with E series and LOI. The LO1 series is more of the woman, okay? The E series are more of men. And you cannot have a black Kemite Egyptian with E series, and then you have the West Africans with E series, and then you come back and try to say that the West Africans are not ancient Egyptians. Is hogwash. I show you here because I'm trying to prevent the trolls to come back on here to come up with nonsense like they have done here the last couple of weeks. And matter of fact, I'm gonna have a very short leash today. People were coming up, people were putting things that just I try to be polite, and I try to talk to them and everything, but I want us to be professional. And if you have means of not wanting to be right, I'm going to see this right away. I'm not going to argue with you much. I'm just going to remove you, because this here is further proof about the West Africans being the ancient Egyptians, and I'll get further into that. And this includes the Jews. Now, you say, well, I uh, I like it. I see, Israel today. We know what's going on in Gaza. How I'm related to white folk. Well, I will explain something to you about this as we get into this now. We see who we got here. How you doing, my dear brother? Yes, he was a troll. Lucky the truth loves scrutiny. A nice analogy, my dear brother. Thank you for that analogy. That's pretty good. I like that. Thank you for showing up, my dear brother. Thank you very much. And you should visit Gondar and Ethiopia. Visit Ethiopia. Who is this person here? Visit is it? I think that she's a sister. Is this? I saw one sister here about a month ago, but I can't think of her name. That she's from Ethiopia, and she does a lot of series on Northeast Africa. And if this is the same sister, I'm not sure, but I can't remember her name. I caught some of her programs before on ancient Egypt and whatnot, but I don't know if this is her or not. So I think this may be her, but I'm not sure. But thank you, my dear brother, for showing up. Now, brothers and sisters, we're going to get into something here. I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to get into this right away. This here is a modern map we have here. But I want to show you something, how the ancient Egyptians, I just showed you the ancient Egyptians were what? Or the modern day West Africans. How do we know by DNA now because they have tested the mummies. We have destroyed the racist geneticists and historians who took samples from mummies, those who died, who were Greek and Roman and so forth and so on, and they used that as the guide to show that Egypt was European, and they left the royal mummies alone. See, and now we're at a point, the Akan people, who are a variety of different ethnic groups, okay, within a system in modern day Ghana today, we know that they made the bulk of ancient Egypt. We know this. And we have many other things I'm going to show you to prove what I'm talking about. They left from the bottom where you see in the green here. It went into Egypt, across into Europe. That's right. The black folk went into Europe. If you remember what I was telling you before, Herodias found black people all the way to your right, where it says Iran, all the way over there. That's where he stopped. He found black people there, but he said they were black, but not as black. And remember, I explained that they had thinner features, thinner noses, lips, and their hair was curly and not kinky, but they were still black people. So he talked about that. And so you follow the green, they went into Egypt. Now they came back, okay, through the Middle East as we know today. Brothers and sisters, please hold for 1 second here. Okay, I'm sorry about that. And they came back into Egypt, and then when the great exodus occurred, they went by the red you see into West Africa. This is not only the Khan people, you had the Hausa people, you had Ga people, you had Ewe people, you had many different ethnic groups, the Mende people, because black Africans began to come into Egypt, slowly over the centuries. And so they had different dialects, but they were all black. And some made their way into to Europe. And this is where the contention is here, because brothers and sisters, why I said I reluctant to talk a lot about this, because we've had fallacies for centuries upon centuries. We talk about the Jewish people, and it's a heated topic. Anything that you say especially if you're not concurrent to their beliefs, then you're anti-Semitic and so forth and so on. We know what's going on. Even now inside the United States, they make laws so stringent you can barely do anything. If you say anything, it's enough for you to be arrested or have your business taken down. It's gotten to the point where it's ridiculous. And all of this stuff is a fallacy, meaning I'm going to get to the bottom of this to explain how we got the Jews and Hebrews. But this map here gives you indication how the Akan people and other African tribes went into Europe in the green, came back in the blue, back into Egypt. When the Exodus occurred, they came across into what? West Africa, as we know today. The Mende, the Mendinka, the Kapele, there was the Fulani, of course, the Amazigh, all of these black tribes, if you will, all came across, went across the north through the Sahara, as it began to dry up, and then into coastal West Africa. We know this to be the case. Now, how do we get the term Jew in Hebrew? It came from the Europeans, brothers and sisters. See, this is where now we're going to get into some sticky issues here. When the Europeans encountered the black folk that came into Europe, that's right, we came there. They began to, because they had different rituals and beliefs, and they were just different people. They began to call them names, like in Latin. Okay, Jew and Hebrew. Just make it fast because there's a long series of things here on that, but I'm not going to get deep into that. But they're the ones who coined the term Jew in Hebrew. That's why you don't find it in, I think, the biblical books. You don't find it. And I'll get more into the biblical books too. So they were coined this, and these are black tribes at this time. They intermixed with the European population. And okay, here we go. And this is the Jewish map here, where the Europeans coined this term. Again, the green is the black Africans when they were going from Egypt across to Jazira, all the way across into Europe. And the Europeans began to designate them with names: Jew, Hebrew. Okay, they had reasons why they named them this. This is how this came about. They came back in the blue, back into Egypt. When the Exodus occurred, most of them, this is where it's very interesting, most of them then traveled back into the south, into West Africa, into North Africa. And they were named at that time Jews and Hebrews. But the genetic drift, the genetics to this is here where we got something. The royal classes of Jews, they have a gene that's been designated called priestly gene. This gene is not found among the Akan people or any others. This is where the fallacy has happened, brothers and sisters. If you understand what's going on here, the Jews and the Christians were misnamed. Jews and Hebrews were misnamed, and that term took on a persona. This is what they gave to the names of African tribes who traveled up into Europe, as I showed you. But the real Jews that we understand, the real Jews with the tenets and so forth that we know that's Jewish, were found in the red going all the way down the Limba people. The Limba people are the ones who are the carriers of the priestly gene. The modern day Jews, only between 3 to 5% of them or less have this gene. But they are African people. When the Akan, the Ga, the Hausa, many went into Europe. The guy was on here last week. He was talking about European. He had partial right, but I didn't want to get into the area about Europe, but he kept trying to say that the black people originated, some people originated in Europe and it came out. He didn't have it right because he was taking down anything in Google, and some of it is racist, and he was using that as his vehicle of study. But the Limba people is down here, red, you see, down in the southeast central area. They were the ones that have this Jewish gene. They, in turn, were found in the Middle East. They came into Egypt and so forth and so on. And they left in the Exodus to go back to southern Egypt. Southern Africa. We know this to be the case. Now we have DNA to show the Israel that you see today in Israel are not the same as the real Jews. The real Jews are black. They're the Limba people. But the Jews that you know today, they're white now because of after centuries upon centuries and centuries of mixing, and they were European converts on top of that. And when they converted to Judaism, this is what they called it in Europe. The black people were actually practicing these tenets. The Europeans again gave them the title Jews and Hebrews. The Europeans adopted, who came to Judaism, many intermarried with our brothers, the Akan brothers, the Gah brothers, the Hausa brothers. They intermarried, but not a lot, but they intermarried. But here's the kicker, brothers and sisters, which I'm gonna get into, is the names. I know you cannot see this very well. To your left are the names of the Jews today still carry African names. They changed it to hide their African identity. One of the most famous is Barkowitz. Barkowitz is Jewish, but you find the Barko people in Ghana and Togo today. There's almost 50 of these names that the Jews have these names today are actually Akan, Gah, Hausa, some Fulani, and different varieties of names. That's right. So this is where the confusion is. I'm hoping that you guys you listen to this again. The Jews and the Hebrews were named by the Europeans. They weren't named by the Africans. They weren't named by anybody in the Middle East, because the Jews were not around until almost after. There's a chronological number that they gave, and that probably add more to the confusion. But I wanted to get this part to you here. And okay, no, this is about the Quran. I want to get here now. This is a bigger picture. These are common names that you see today in the United States. This Arkoff here. There's a lot of Jews with this name, especially in Barkowitz. A lot I know in the United States, and also here as Yemenian. This is another. I know the many Jews with these names, but these are the names from Khan and from Mende people and so forth and so on. The Jews today still have those names because they adopted those names. Many intermarried with Africans, right? And they became the Jews because the Europeans named them that. But the real Jews, brothers and sisters, as you heard me say, were the Limba people. Where are we at here? The Limba people, because now we found their DNA. The priestly gene is among them. I know it may be confusing to you. This is why I'm saying why there's wars, why there's been killing, why there have been massacres, why there have been slavery, because they want to hide a fact about the Jewish history. And the Europeans learned that they were doped. Because when the documents that they thought were the Bible, when they learned from their explorers and the historians that those documents came out of Egypt, the Europeans went on a inquisition to kill Africans, to cover this fact about this. And to make further, which I'll get more into this, when the Europeans found out that the Jews lied to them, they created the New Testament. See, brothers and sisters, why you have so many discrepancies in the Bible? Because they took the documents from Egypt. So I want to give you these preface to get your mind going, because we all have been doped. Because you have to ask, where did the Hebrews come from? The West Africans that we have, the Hebrews and Jews today, they may not be carrying the Limba gene, which is the Jewish priestly gene, but they're real Jews and Hebrews because they came to Judaism in ancient Egypt, but they are ancient Africans, ancient Egyptians, no doubt about the Kemites. They are. As you see my chart that I gave you, these, you can't, there's no way that you have one person who's an E series that's in ancient Egypt, okay, Kemp, and then you have an E series of the West Africans, our descendants who were taken to America. The African Americans, you are descended from this. A lot of you is hidden because why? The Europeans, had sexual relations with our women, and it produced a lot of craziness because the men folk in the United States mainly carry the R series because of the Europe, because it's the Y gene, the man gene, and the gene, and we carry the gene of the man, the man's history. So we have the European because the European essentially raped our women. But if you look at a black man and you see the R series, but you go to his mother, you'll see the mother, she's with the series of E's or she has the L. These, the series like this, you'll see this. Okay, now you see this backdrop. Why I continue harp and say Egypt is ours. I gave you more proof of this. We're going to get into the saga about the Jews and the Hebrews because it's a fallacy, brothers and sisters. The Europeans know this. Gary Greenberg's book, if you look at in the chat, you got to get this if you're interested in this, brothers and sisters, because he's a Jewish scientist. He wrote about these discrepancies. He began to find this lie. How did the Jews become the Jews and Hebrews? He found it was originated in Europe. The Europeans called black people Jews. That's right. They called us the Akan people, the Ga people, the Hausa people. They may even have Fulani people and, Mende, a whole bunch of Africans left to go up into Europe as we know it today. The Europeans encountered them. And the Europeans saw they had different, which many Africans, West Africans today, still practice certain rituals that the Jews still practice today. So how can we have that? The Jews were not slave owners in the United States. Maybe some here and there, very few. But how is it that the Jews have African names? How is it the Jews carry these genes? See, because why? The misnomer was the Europeans coined the black Africans, Jews and Hebrews. See the confusion to this? So when they begin to go back into Egypt, as I showed you in the map, the Jewish map here, they in the blue. Now they left. They're still black, okay? They're still black. And they came across in the blue back into the Middle East and back into Egypt. The Exodus occurred. In red, they left to go North Africa, across to West Africa, and also to East Africa and further south under the title Jew. But the real Jews are the Limba people. I know this is confusing to you. I know this is confusing. Limba people are still black, but they are the ones who were the actual real Jews who practiced the tenets of Judaism. Our black African ancestors who went into Europe didn't practice Jewish tenets. The Limba people did, and still do today. If you go to Israel today, they still practice the same tenets that their forefathers who were black, the Limba people, were practicing. You understand, brothers and sisters? So again, we look at the Akan map because most of the people that went up there were Akan. The reason why we know that is because by the names, the Jews still have the name Barkowitz, Ashurmenia. There's a whole lot of these names, almost 50 or more of these names that the Jews still have today. And the black Africans still have these names. The only difference is that the Jews covered their ancestry by adding suffix to their names. Okay, Barco, right? Many Black Africans in West Africa still have this name, Barco. They added wits to it, Barkowitz. You see, this is what they did in order to hide their ancestry, because as they became white, because of now centuries upon centuries and centuries of mixing, okay, and then what happened was the black element was gone because they returned back to the Middle East as we know it today, or Jazir Arab, back into Egypt and then back into Africa. So there were no more introduction of black strain to darken the population. So the Jews again left out. They went to the Middle East and so forth and so on. And the modern Jews, their converts, came to the Middle East, and this is where the confusion is. They say they're Jew and Hebrew. They are not. But if you look at it from the European standpoint, they are, because the Europeans coined them this term, except the fact that the ones who they coined, Jew and Hebrew, are actually black people who are Akan, Ga, and all these other ethnic groups we know in West Africa. This is where the confusion lies, brothers and sisters. See? So I'm giving it to you, and I want you to look at this, and then I want you to examine this and do your research. You got to get Gary Greenberg's book, because he gives you bit by bit to make you understand more of this, that how his people, he knows today, he found out he's a white Jew, but he learned his African heritage. See, and names that the Jews, majority of Jews still carry today are African names. You find them. Now, I'll give you something that's mind-boggling. Here is the chair of the Akan chair. If you look at the pictures of drawings of ancient Egypt, you see these, especially the royal class had chairs like this. We find chairs like this all through West Africa. Okay, and almost about 4,000 years. And so they know this had to be transformed from Egypt into West Africa, and to Ghana in particular. If you can read the description, it's very, very, very small. But this is one of the chairs that the Egyptians, ancient Egyptian Kemites, used to have. It found its way back into West Africa. Again, giving you indication that Egypt is ours, brothers and sisters, and the West Africans are the ancient Egyptians. No doubt about that. You go back to it again for those who are coming late. The royal mummies and the actual indigenous people of Kemt have E series. Okay, E series DNA, okay, genotypes. Our sisters a lot carry the LO series, like my mother. And like many other mothers carry LO. The LO series went all the way down to South Africa. I told you about the LO series where they went down to South Africa, because I have relatives like Nelson Mandela and his family. They related to me, that famous actress, I think her name is Pita. I can't think of her last name now. I'm related to her also. Matter of fact, she's a recent cousin. I was shocked at that. Nelson Mandela, remember the late, great Nelson Mandela, all of these people had the L1 series, the mother. So now you look at this, you see Mende, Mendinka, and so forth, so on, E series, and other Africans across West Africa, we all have these E series as a designation genotype. Again, brothers and sisters, proving that Egypt is ours and that the ancient Egyptians were black folk. The West Africans are the ancient Egyptians. The African Americans are the ancient Egyptians because their kinfolk were taken from West Africa into the Americas. This is why, yeah, I know some Africans, I heard them say, wow, yeah, but you have this R series. Yes, because of genetics. We carry the marker of our fathers. And we know the slave master had his way with our sisters in slavery, and they had children from these bastards. Okay, so I carry R series. But you look at my mom carries the LO series, right? But if you go now to turn to look back into my mom's, my grandmother on my dad's side, you'll find the E series because she was Igbo. And if you guys saw my program here 3-4 months ago, I showed you about my family history and showed my family. You look at my dad, he looked like Nigerian. No doubt. You know, when I get a picture and make me laugh, my dad's passed on many years now. But if you saw my dad, very, very black skinned, he had this look about him. He looked Nigerian. And we know now he was, because it had came from my mom on my grandmother on my mom's on my dad's side, okay, because she was very dark, and all of them were very some were tall and muscular build, but they all had this. And I told you, some of my relatives in Kentucky, they were black as the night. All right, and so, and you look at them, and I had uncles that were 70 years old and they were still muscular build. This come from the Igbo and the Yoruba. That's in my family tree on my dad's side. And of course, my mom's side, you have, the Fulani and Amazir and Mende, okay? I have that in Mendinka and ancient Egyptian as well. See, because we have our relatives there in Egypt that I'm cousins to today, and they have the L series. See, so I'm just bringing these points to you to harp home something to you, brothers and sisters, to show you that we have been doped for centuries upon centuries about Christianity and the Bible. You saw my short take I had here a couple of days ago talking about where are the books of Moses and Jesus. Remember, I asked a question that, where are those books? See, I asked those questions. Okay, let's get here to some of our brothers and sisters here. Okay, here we got wait a minute here. The Hebrews were mainly like Arabs with E. Wait a minute. Street soup. Wait a minute. Whoa. Wait a minute. Here you know what? Whoa. Wait a minute. I removed you. I'm not going to play with you today. I'm not going to play with you. Because you were trying to take us out, and you were coming up with all kind of stuff. And now you said mainly like the Arabs with. You didn't even listen to what I said. I just showed you a map and how we got the term Hebrew and Jew. It came out from Europe. It didn't come from the Middle East. They misnamed the black people who were there. And we've proven that because of DNA. The black people, the Akan people, they were the ancient Egyptians. They traveled up north and they went into Europe. True. The Europeans encountered them. The Europeans didn't know what to call them. They saw them having certain things, so they began to call them names like Jew and Hebrew. Latin, they're long names, but you shorten it into the English, Jew and Hebrew. But the real Jews were not the Akan people. They were the Limba people who were in the Middle East. And we found their gene, which is called the priestly gene, among them. The priestly gene are not among the West Africans as we know it today. But West Africans did convert to Judaism, and they are Jews. No different than the Europeans that we see in Israel today. Yes, they're Jews because that's their heritage. I mean, that's their religion. But are they original Jews? No, they're not. In certain regards, because again, the Europeans and blacks intermarried in Europe. You think this is a new phenomenon today when you see the TV? You see an English woman and a black African man or African American man married to an English woman. This stuff has been going on for over 2,000 years. So it's nothing new. And we know that the real Jews and Hebrews are black because the Europeans, and look at the documentation. See, and I just showed you a map here, and I'm gonna go back to this map for this guy one time, and I'm gonna throw him out. Here it is here. Now you talking this street Sufi, he makes me angry because you come here, you nothing but a troll. I'm gonna throw you out. Here is the proof here that you talk about the Hebrew black and so forth and so on. Here's the E series. Where does the E series lie? The E series goes where? To West Africa. My descendants and the descendants of most of the brothers here who come on the site, who are Fulani, who Hausa and Igbo and Mende and Mendika and so forth. All these people here, you have a heritage, and someone in the family tree have the E series. Like on my dad's side, with my mom, okay, my grandmother. On my mom's side was Fulani. She had the L series. So what you talk about here is is I just got to telling you, the Hebrews were mainly like Arabs with. Okay, stop. Okay, I'm gonna put you out here now. I'm not gonna play with your stuff here today. Okay, bad. Okay, there it is. I'm not gonna. He come in here again. He's starting up. He didn't even look at the map. He didn't even look at the evidence I give about the E series. He comes and takes us out of Egypt again. He's gone. He's finished. He's out. He's gone. He's gone. Let me get this guy. Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Again, yes, brother Henry, you got it right. This is true. We know the big exodus that happened from Egypt came out, and all of the African tribes, the Dogon, who I talked about 2 months ago, who are famous for interstellar space, all came out of Egypt. All came out of Egypt, and all of them have some forms of this E series genotype, which is indicative of the ancient Egyptians who carried this type. They don't carry the R series. See, except the Romans who came in as conquerors. See, no doubt about that. So Egypt's are, but not Islam. Now I don't know what you mean. I don't know the comment. Okay, Akan are Egyptian. Yes, the Akan people are. They are the main stock of the ancient Egyptians, which we'll get more into that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We are now at the point I gave you the proof about the Akan people and about this chair. That's one. Now I gave you the DNA, and so now, brothers and sisters, when you see people come in the chat, they try to take you out by trying to tell you that use terms of Hebrews and stuff like that. I told you how the real Jews were misnamed because the Europeans again named the Akan people, the God people, the house of people, and others who migrated up into Europe, and they called them Jews in Hebrews. That name stuck. It did. It stuck with them. They came back across, but the real Jews were the Limba people who they did their DNA study and found them. They still practice Jewish tenets. The Falasha Jews also in Ethiopia are part of this heritage from this Limba people as well. Okay, so we know this. And everybody's black. Okay, everybody was black. Now, I want to cover something here, brothers and sisters. I'm going to talk to you about some things about what we know about the difficulties of what's before us and who is Jew and who is not Jew. We have researchers who have done a heck of a job in helping us to decipher who is what, who is black, who's white, who is actually quote unquote Jew, and so forth and so on. Who is Hebrew? All of this. We've now got this. And I gave you the names, and I want to get back with that again. I gave you some of the names of, okay, here. This is a smidgen of that, of names of, again, the Jews that we know today that are in Europe, they're everywhere. Okay, even in Africa, they still carry these African Akan names. And some carry Fulani names, and others, they carry God names, and so forth and so on. And they changed the names in order for them to adapt to the European role. So this is some of this. And again, back for those who are new coming in, the Europeans coined Black Africans Jews. That's what they called them because they had no name to call them. When they came and migrated to Europe, they called them Jews. And this is how this came about. This is why the depiction of Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam, is black. Because This is the people who were there in the region, and the Europeans already had their dealings with these black people who they called Jews. Now you see the picture, brothers and sisters. They called these black people the Khan people, the God people, the Hausa people, the Fulani people, the Mende, the Mendinka. All these people went in droves into Europe. They called them Jews and Hebrews. That's right. So when you think about Hebrew and Jew and so forth, don't think about the people that you see in the Middle East today, because they came to Judaism. It's true. They converted to Judaism, but they don't possess the gene of the real Jews, the Limba people, but they possess the genes of the Khan and other Black African tribes. And they still carry the names of Black African people from West Africa. Okay, it's very small print, I know. Barkowitz, you see here, okay, maybe you see it better. Barkowitz, here you see it's famous. There's a lot of names that Jewish names that are very famous, Odom and so forth and so on. All of these today, Africans in West Africa have these names, brothers and sisters. So how can you have a white man, Jew, who's in Europe, who's in the Middle East, who's in Canada and America? He has the same name as a Black African from West Africa. They pulled a fast one on us. And this is why the killing began, to hide the fact that the real Jews are Black. Now I've given you something to help you to understand. And the scientists have uncovered this. We had Jewish scientists who did their job. And they really helped us in deciphering this, because they themselves, when they found out that they weren't, quote unquote, the real Jews, they began to try to find out who were the real Jews. And they came to Africa and they found their antecedents, the Limba people who were in Southeast Africa. It's very interesting, brothers and sisters. Okay, very interesting. And I'm going to start to give you some of the thing here. Okay, where they at? Okay, now, who was the prophet? This is a key thing, brothers and sisters. Who was the prophet living among the Kemp people and received these revelations? Because I'm going to get into something about the Bible now as well. And gave the Kemites laws, rules, stories of creation. We created all of this, and it found its way in the Bible. You say, how? Because the documents that they found on a papyrus and on the hieroglyphics were written 3,000, sometimes, between 2,000 and 3,000 years before the Bible was created. So how did you find the Song of Solomon, which I'll get into a little bit here, Psalms and names, things like this? You find predecessors in Egypt that wrote this, but they called it a different name. How did he find his way into the Bible? Because the trickery, they took these documents and they began to manifest, like saying that the Jews, this is to show you our history and so forth and so on. And they began to take these documents, translate it into Greek and eventually into Hebrew. And this is why we have the problem today. When the scientists start to dig up and find these papyrus and the hieroglyphics and so forth and so on, they found Songs of Solomon, Psalms, the Lamentations, all the stuff you see in the Bible, they found it in papyrus that was written 3,500 years before, some 2,500 years before. And now Jewish scientists and those who are right are very upset at these findings. And this is why they're going on the campaign to shut up everybody, because they don't want it known. This is not off topic, brothers and sisters. This is not off topic. When the European church, the Roman church, realized they had been doped, they created the New Testament, you heard me say. Now they wanted to finish the job so that way we will never know the real origins of the Bible and Christianity. So they came to Egypt in 391 and he slaughtered just about most of all of the ancient Egyptian people who were there, who were descended of, with the E series and so forth, and slaughtered them. All the scribes of the mystery schools were slaughtered. The mystery schools were burnt down to the ground. As you heard me say for weeks now, many of the scribes knew they were going to die. So what they did, they buried their works in deep in ground caves and so forth, so on. The book of the dead was uncovered, and other things like this. They gave us the real proof on how the Bible was created. Brothers and sisters, Subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking to us. He gave us the creation first. It wasn't quote unquote the Jews, because why I'm saying that? Again, brothers and sisters, the documents that you find like Lamentations, Psalms, Song of Solomon, and these things like this, you find them already in the hieroglyphics and papyrus that they found, okay? They were already written between 2,000 to 3,000 years before the Bible was created. This is why I said I had a hard time talking about this, because we have people still today believe in this, and this evidence is out to show again that Subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking to us, and they hid that from us. We had a prophet. We don't know who the prophet was. We know Prophet Joseph was there. We know that because his name in the hieroglyphics is Osopho. Osopho is from West Africa. It's more Akan and Ga, okay, than Hausa or Igbo or Yoruba. It's more of a Khan name, Osopho, okay? This is the name that was written. It's there. They took the Jewish, quote unquote now, who they were called Jews, scholars, took the Egyptian documents that was written 2,000 years before they were born, and they began to change the names. They took these documents and then put them into the Bible. This is why Subhanahu wa ta'ala is so angry with the Jews and the Christians, because in the Quran, Subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us this timeline saying what the Jews had done. They changed the books. We know that now. I'm giving you this evidence. They killed many of the prophets. They did this. And Subhanahu wa ta'ala says in anger, he will not allow for anybody to come now to corrupt the last remaining prophet and his book, which we have not seen over 1,400 years. The Quran is still the same as it was written then. But the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament is not, because it's been played with because why? It was created from a lie. And this is, yes, the ancient Kemites had these, yes, because Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us first. That's right, brothers and sisters. He gave us 3,000 years before the Bible was created, before Moses, because Moses trained in Egypt, you know that, in the mystery schools. We had the book of Lamentations. We had the Song of Solomon. All of these things. The Tale of Two Brothers is what? That's talking about Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. We know him as Joseph. Okay, all of this stuff we had. Now the scientists have found and uncovered this. And that's why they embarked on a killing spree. And in order to also cover it up, the Europeans now begin to sanction slavery. And they begin to demonize us. They changed Jesus from black to white. They went on a white supremacy, white man's burden thing, which is still carried today, to colonize the world, to make them the Godhead, make us worship them. They rule over us. All of this type of thing. All of this in order to hide the real fact that the Christianity and Judaism, as we know today, was actually Black African tribes who had these documents 3,000 years before the Bible was created, brothers and sisters. That's right. And to make matters worse, they took the documents, the Jewish scientists now who were black, okay, they were black. And the Greeks, Ptolemy, he asked the scholars this is how we came up with the Bible. They wanted a religious book. They went to the Jewish scribes, scholars, and they had access to the documents. They begin to take our documents, the documents of the Khan people, the God people, and so forth and so on. Because now the Jews that we know at that time had changed because they went into Europe and the Middle East, and now they came back and they have problems there encamped with their black brothers because they were no longer quote unquote African anymore because they left to go up to the Europe, came back through Middle East, back into Egypt. They were still black, but their culture was different. And they were aligned themselves more or less with the Greeks now. So the Greeks went to them because they knew they were black and said to them, hey, I need you to give me this, like a book, a religious book. So they went to the mystery schools, who they had access to, and took the documents. And then they came and said that Moses wrote 5 books, alayhi salatu wasalam. And here is the kicker to that, brothers and sisters. Deuteronomy 34.6. This shows you something's wrong. Moses alayhi salam allegedly said in there, he talks about his death and where he was buried. Now, how can a person talk? He's dead. Okay, he's already dead. About a place where he's buried, where he's going to be killed. Where he's going to die and be buried. Now, they said the last book. How could he's dead now? So how can he write the last of the 5 books of Moses? How? He could not. He's dead. This is a discrepancy. Because the Bible was created on a lie, brothers and sisters. There's revelation to Moses, no doubt. Yes, it was revelation given to him. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to him, and he gave him rules and laws, and it gave him the Torah. No doubt about that. But the black Jews and Hebrews at that time were crafty. They began to add things to it. So they took the 42 negative confessions and used some of that as well, and they began to formulate a book. They began to attribute the mystery school religious documents into holy books of the Bible. Brothers and sisters, we have this proof now. We have this proof. Okay, let me see. I want to get you here into something here, because this is going to upset a lot of Africans everywhere, because for them, they have been worshiping in such a way. That's why I had reservations about doing it, because our African brother who wrote one of the books, he found these things. Him and Jewish scientists, they uncovered this along with many other scientists. And the Song of Solomon, brothers and sisters, here we have the honor of Sin Wasri. It was his name that was changed and attributed. Now, the songs, now these poems that was like in the Song of Solomon are identical practically to that was written 3,000 years ago, but it was attributed to Solomon alayhi salam. So again, brothers and sisters, we have problems here. And I want to reiterate to you, 3,000 years before, Subhanahu wa ta'ala, before the Bible, he came to us. He gave us a prophet. Who that prophet was, we don't know. In it, he gave the creation, all of this. It found its way into the Bible. So Subhanahu wa ta'ala had us as the chosen people because he gave us all of this knowledge. How do you think we had the hieroglyphics? How do you think that we could look into space without a telescope? He gave us all the laws of the earth, the 4 opposites. Remember I told you air, water, land, and fire. He gave all that to us. He gave us all the religious books, the Songs of Solomon, Book of Job. All of these here are all Egyptian books way before the Bible was even created. In the Bible, they created the Bible and they took these writings, the Book of Lamentations, okay, Book of Lamentations here. Now, it's funny. In the Book of Lamentations, here, the Africans had, and I'll write this to you, brothers and sisters, and I'll get to some of the comments here in a minute. Hold on, brothers and sisters, and I'll get to you in a minute here. The Lamentations of Kwaku. Okay, my computer is not going to let me, because I try to write it and they try. You know how the computers do nowadays; they got a mind of its own. You know, I mean, just starts to change things. You write something, they say, no, I don't like this word. Okay, now save that word, Kwaku. Okay, pra. Okay, and sebe. Okay, sebe. Brothers and sisters, think about this. You see this here? The Lamentations that you know in the Bible as the Book of Lamentations came from original Egyptian our people 3,000 years before who wrote this, but it was known there as Kwaku Pra Sebe. So how did this documents find its way and it was changed to Lamentations? This is what I'm trying to tell you, brothers and sisters. That's why in some ways I didn't want to talk about this, because this lore here got many of our people killed for it in slavery and everything, because they had to deem, because when the Europeans found out that the books that they thought was sacred, they found Black Africans had this, and that's when they ordered the murder in 391 of all of the Egyptian scribes in the mystery schools, burn them down to the ground, take their documents and burn them. Unfortunately for us, many kept the documents in underground caverns. They knew they were dead. They knew they were dead meat, but they wanted to preserve the writings for us. And many, they dropped the documents into caverns and so forth and so on. We found them centuries upon centuries later. After now modern times, we start to, we find a cavern, we find documents in it, because the scribes were being killed. They killed all of them. None were allowed to live. When they found out that the things like the Lamentations were actually Kwaku Pra Saba. This is the African name, the Akan name that was used in the documents they found. When they began to translate these documents, they said, wait a minute, this is the same as the Lamentations in the Bible. When they went to the songs of the honor of Sowore, Kakari, they found this to be Song of Solomon. Again, written 3,000 years before. No, this one was 2,500 years before, written 2,500 years before. This is the name, but it was changed to Song of Solomon. Brothers, I'm telling you right now, Subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to us. He spoke to us first. Let me get here to see, here we got, here we got Henry. Moses meant child of Yeram's child of Ra. It is not a name, but a mistranslation. Yes, Moses is a mistranslation, and we know he has an Akan God name. We know this, and it's been changed over. But in Arabic, we have, like, Arabic is Musa. We know that Musa, which is very close to the Akan language name for that. We know this to be the case, and we know that Moses, alayhi salatu wasalam, was schooled in the mystery systems, and he was not, quote unquote, a Jew. We know this. Again, when I'm talking about Jew, we have two Jews. So we talking about two Jew families here. We have the Khan and the Ga and the Hausa and so forth, who went into Europe and were named Jews and Hebrews, misnamed that. They called it by this. They didn't have no name. They called them Jews and Hebrews. Okay. Then we have the real Hebrews, who were the Limba people who came from the south in Africa. Okay, Southeast Africa. We have this confusion now. Moses was ancient Egyptian because he had the E series, no doubt, of genotype. No doubt. See, and he studied in the mystery schools. There's no doubt. Egypt to Islam is all, or as dark-skinned people have been rocking this way. And the original Arabs were black, yes, and they came from Yemen, in which Yes, the real Arabs we know were what? Black. The real Jews we know were black. I just gave you this history, and we have scientists. If you please, in the chat, I gave Gary Greenberg's. If all of you are interested, you look at. He's a Jew. He's not a black man from Compton, or he's not looking like me. So if some of you are inclined not to want to believe another black man, you go to his book. He's a white man. He's a white Jew, but he's a scientist, and he wrote the truth because he himself had problems because he's trying to figure out. He said, "Look, who am I? I'm supposed to be Jewish," but he thought his ancestry was there in Europe, and it wasn't there. He found out the real ancestry was in Southeast Africa, the Limba people. He found out many of the people that he understood also, right, to be Jews were actually Akan people. That's right. The Akan people was Ghana, the Ga people, the Hausa people, the Igbo people, Yoruba people, this who you see today, who mixed with black people. They still took our names, Burko. There's Ghanaians with the name Burko. The Jews changed it to Berkowitz to hide their African ancestry. That's right. That's just one name. Showed you a list because they knew that they were black people. They knew this. And let me get further into this, brothers and sisters here. Now, the Samaritans were a group of Christian people who the Muslims always protected. And we consider them to be brothers because they were in Tawheed. They believed Jesus, alayhi salam, was not a God, but a prophet. But here's the thing. They were the caretakers of the book of, John the Baptist. He wrote. That's right. All these things were missing out of the present Bible to cover up the real truth. Jesus and Moses, alayhi salam, Jamian, though they had these documents, they had the sunnah of Jesus, alayhi salam. Where's Jesus' way, alayhi salam, in the Bible? You can't find it. How about you say the 5 books of Moses? Do they give you his way? They give you laws. But now we know that the laws came from his ancestors who were black in Africa well before he was even born. So we know subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us rules and laws. Moses, alayhi salam, took those laws and the laws that subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. Subhanahu wa ta'ala narrowed the laws down. Now you say, well, I don't understand why you're talking about. I give you an example of that in Islam. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave an order that told the Prophet, alayhi salam, in Islam, you would pray many times per day. The Prophet, alayhi salam, negotiated with subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we get at 5 because he said it'd be a burden on my ummah to perform. So he kept lowering the number to now it's to 5. You see, this is what we know. We know our Prophet gave us this in Hadiths. He talked about negotiations with subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we were granted 5 daily prayers. And then there's other ones that's involuntary. But the Jews, okay, as we understand them today, brothers and sisters, okay, it's confusing as heck. I know that. When you see Netanyahu, we have brothers who sitting in Ghana and Togo and in Benin with his name. See? And the tribe that went into Europe and came across, and you saw my map to go back into the Middle East, the two names, which I'll get, see if I can get there, because there's a lot of notes here. Netanyahu is from the Akan language. Okay, we know that. And we know the Akan language, there's 8 dialects of it. We know this. And Netanyahu is 2 particular groups of the Akan people. We know that. But when they begin to have a union, right, they became Netanyahu. The killer who's there in Israel today, who's killing our brothers in Gaza, he's descended from the Akan people. He still have our names. That's why I told you, brothers and sisters, today, I told you the other day, that when you look at the Jews, you start looking at their names. If you get Greenberg's book, he gives you the names of what Jews have today and the African equivalent. How can a black man who's sitting in Togo or in Benin, has nothing to do with the Middle East, sitting and having the name Netanyahu? How is a black man who's walking around today, who's Ga, his name is Barco? Huh? And we have all of these names still in Africa, in West Africa today. How? And the Jews that we understand today have these names. Burko, Netanyahu. That's right, brothers. It's fascinating. Very, very fascinating. These books originated in a camp belonging to the Africans. Moses, alayhi salam, carried these books out when he was given an order from Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there's contention. I won't get deep in that, but we know that there was exodus because many people left. We know this. We know many people left, and they end up going to West Africa, they're going to East Africa, they start to go to South Central Africa. We know this. Big exodus. They go across the north to the Sahara today. They went across there. We know it was a massive exodus. They went back into the Middle East. Okay, Jazeera. We know this. And we know that Moses alayhi salam had access because he was in the mystery schools. He was trained there. So the Jews who wrote the Bible began to take the original documents 3,000 years before the Bible was created, began to attribute names like Kweku Seba. I gave you that name. Lamentations. That's the Lamentations, the real Lamentations that our African brothers wrote 3,000 years before they compiled it in the Bible. How can the Bible have the same Lamentations, the same wording as it 3,000 years? Something's wrong, brothers and sisters. The Jews did not receive that revelation. We did. And we wrote those documents. That's why I said to you first, who was the prophet who was guiding us in ancient Egypt well before the Bible was created? Because he gave us creation. We wrote the creation, brothers and sisters. That's right. In the mystery systems, we have documents, and they found many of these documents. We wrote the creation. We wrote the thing on monotheism. You heard me talk about this the other day. I gave you what was found in the hieroglyphics. God is one in English. God is one. Okay, these things, you find it today in the Old Testament. It was written 3,000 years before that. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave our people this information first. It was stolen from us and compiled in the Bible, and then it was peddled for thousands of years now as them being the chosen people, when in fact, that's not the case. The real chosen people were the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Ga people, the Khan people, the ancient Igbo, Yoruba, there's the Mende people, all were there in ancient Egypt. And some prophet, we don't know who he was there. Subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to us first. He gave us he gave us what we call Genesis. He gave us that. We wrote this. And all it found its way in the Bible, didn't it? He gave us Song of Solomon. We had that. I told you the name. The Lamentations book, that. Job, all of these books were written beforehand. Our brothers who were the Jews, okay, now who came back to Egypt, took those documents and gave them to the Greeks, and they translated and they put their titles to it to make it as though they received the revelation when in fact they didn't. Moses alayhi salam did receive no doubt, he did. But our Jewish brothers, okay, who were black at that time, pulled a fast one, essentially. That's the only way I can say that. Pulled a fast one. And now we start to have the difficulty as Europeans, scholars who have lambasted, hate black people, talk against us, now found out black people actually wrote the Bible. They can't stand this. They can't stand it. And Greenberg in his book talks about these issues. And they knew they were fooled, so they created the New Testament. That's why the Bible is untrustworthy. Subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is very angry with the Jews and the Christians. He mentions many times in there about how they took his documents, meaning what I see it, that the ancient Akan, Ga, Yoruba, Igbo people who were in ancient Egypt at this time, 3,000 years before the Jews came back to Egypt, see, and gave us all of this divine guidance, the creation, the laws of opposite. We had all of this. See, the interstellar space, he gave all of this well before the Bible was created, brothers and sisters. And now we found this, and this is what I'm giving you some today. And I'm telling you right now, it's powerful. It's powerful. I mean, it's powerful. The biblical Psalms. I'll get into this a little bit more, and then I'll be closing it pretty soon. And I'm gonna get to some of our brothers here in their comments. Please hold fast, dear brothers. Our famous prophet Joseph, you know him as English. We know him in Arabic as Yusuf. We know him in the Akan language as written in the African and on the papyrus. We know him as Osopho. That's the name he had. When you look at the stories that was written by our ancient ancestors, okay, ancient Egypt, well, 3,000 years now before the Bible, we have a discrepancy here. We have a writing in the hieroglyphics called The Tale of Two Brothers. This is an English translation. It mirrors what was written in the Bible about Joseph, as you know him in English. Now, brothers and sisters, it may be hurtful for a lot of us. And why I kept trying to tell you Egypt is ours. Somebody took those documents, one of our Jewish ancestors who was black at the time, who returned back to Egypt. They were no longer now part of the clans because they went up into Europe, and now they had changed. You know what happens when people change? Brothers leave the South from Alabama, they go to California, they lose the accent, right? They lose many different cultural things. We know that. The brothers down in Mississippi, they have a way about them that's a little different than the brother in LA. This is what happened. When the black brothers, their Khan and all of them went into Europe, they were there for a long time. They came back to ancient Egypt. They were not the same as their brothers, the Ga and the Khan people. They were different now. They took the documents and attributed to our prophet Joseph. And this is a problem. And we have this, there's a book here called The Wisdom of Ancient Egypt. And one of the scientists found this discrepancy as well. There's so many. The documents, it goes on and on, brothers and sisters. This is why many of us have problems when we were quote unquote Christians. And I told you, it bothered me every time I would go to the church. I could not understand why I felt the way I felt. I started to find discrepancies, even in my own house. My mom would read a verse, my dad would read the same verse. They were different. It always was mind-boggling. And my mom would say, no, this is, she would talk to my dad, say, John is my dad's name. Hey, this is authentic. This is more authentic than yours. They used to have this kind of debates. And when I was at the church, they would read, 5 people read the same verse. Each one had different versions of it. Each one claimed it was right because it was formulated from other documents. And that's why it has changed over and over again. The Song of Solomon, again, where you're talking about the heritage, was Solomon in the original documents that we know today. Okay, the Song of Solomon, we know today, where he said, I'm black and comely. The Europeans saw, again, another opportunity to change it, to denounce the black history of the ancient Jews who became the Jews, okay? and they wrote dark. But the Egyptian documents talk about the word Kemt. That means black. And they changed it. This is why you pick up the Bible today, sometimes you find old King James version where you see Song of Solomon, first paragraph, where he says, I'm black but comely. But of course, it's been changed around by saying that I was cursed because I stayed in the sun. I forgot we know what has happened to the Bible has been changed. That's why it's 140 different versions of it. But the evidence, brothers and sisters, is so overwhelming. It's in the hieroglyphics. We have the name of the prophet Solomon, but he was named as Salome. This is the name we knew him in the Akan African languages. But of course, as in Arabic, Suleiman, in English, Solomon. In the Akan and Gal language, we know him, and also in Igbo at that time was used because it's part of one family. We know him as Salome. Okay, that's the name that was written 3,000 years before. Okay, we had these documents, and this is why, brothers and sisters, we have a problem. We know that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala brought prophets because he's told that he brought prophets to everybody. But we have a Bible that has been corrupted because they took documents from ancient Egyptians, our ancestors, okay, and took them from the mystery schools and began to attribute them to the prophets. And this was to make the confusion so bad. Because how could you find passages of Psalms that was written 3,000 years before the Bible was created? It's the same. How you have the book of Job, you have some of the same passages that was written 3,000 years now as in the Bible. You have also, again, the Lamentations I gave you. The Lamentations is almost identical. Kwaku, Pra Seba, I gave you that name earlier. This was Lamentations. We named it Lamentations, but this is actually the African name because this is what was written 3,000 years before the Bible was even created. And he took all of these documents and put them in the Bible. And he called it their own. And we know now it's not right. I gave you also the part about how our ancestors, I can't believe this. We got working out here. You can see this people here, they're doing work. You got to excuse me, brothers and sisters. There's work. We have work around here, so the microphone picks up a lot of noise. So anyway, I gave you this information today, and I'm going to get further into this. I'm just giving you tidbits of information right now to get you to rethink and what happened. Now, I'm going to give you some other things. Gary Greenberg said in his book, again, The Moses Mystery, he said, even if we assume that the Bible is derived from early sources yet to be discovered, it still describes events that occurred more than 1,000 years before the completion. So how could you write something that was already completed and say that you just got a revelation from it when you find the same document was written 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000 years before? This is what Gary Greenberg is saying, what he found. And many other scientists have found the same thing. And in those ancient times, few people had strong traditions of historical writing and perspective. Nobody was writing, but the ancient Egyptians did. So the Jews, as we know, did not have a writing system at that time. So how did they write these documents? This is what even Greenberg said. See, and again, I'm going to give you some more. He says, through several nations had written records in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th BC. Now it's after, before Christ, from which modern historians can draw a conclusion. There's no evidence that Israel was among them. Our Jewish black brothers did not have a writing system when they came. They just didn't have it. But they did find a writing system in their brothers in Egypt and took these documents that I told you today, Kweko, Pra Seba, those names, Lamentations, and they call the Lamentations, when that's the name of, they found it, the Egyptian documents, So they changed the names. This is what we're talking about, brothers and name. When I'm talking to you today, brothers and sisters, they changed this. This is why I gave you the confusion about who is actually a Jew. The Jewish people, or the Limba people, those are real Jews. But the Akan ancestors and Ga and Hausa who traveled up through Middle East into Europe encountered Europeans. The Europeans had no name for them. He saw the way they were acting, saw their language, he saw they're doing certain rituals. So what did they do? They began to call them Jews and Hebrews. This is where the confusion. They kept this title, Jew and Hebrew, and came back through the Middle East as Jews and Hebrews, okay? Went back into Egypt, and they had conflicts with their black brothers they were no longer the same people. They are the same heritage with the E series, but they were no longer the same people because they lived in Europe now for a long time. They had many, generations now. So they had changed. They were still black, but they had changed. See? Boy, this. I think I'm gonna have to conclude here, brothers and sisters, because they're not gonna let me to finish because we have people out here. So I can imagine now what has happened. We got work going out here. We have a road work, and it's very close here to the house, and it's disgusting. Let me see here what we got here. Some brothers here. Excuse me, other first. Yeah, we'll link them salam, my dear brother. No problem. And yes, I got yes. This is a very interesting revelation, and I'm giving it to you. And I gave you the names that the Jewish people that we have today and who they are. Something to throw at you. The people who do not know is that the Quran is a continuation, correction, and yes, it came before. This is true for the book that yes, this is a true statement because Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, we know in the Quran tells us that he will not allow his book to be corrupted because he's mad at the Jews and Christians because they corrupted the books. We know that. And now I gave you the corruption, didn't I? I gave you the corruption. See, I gave you the corruption. Why Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is angry? Because they took documents, because now we know that the people who Subhanahu wa Ta'ala was directing his to take his way were not the Jews who said they were the chosen people. He gave it to our African brothers who are now the West Africans and the African Americans, because they're descended from the West Africans. He gave us the creation. He gave us all of the religious documents that were found in the Bible that they put 3,000 years later. We are the chosen people that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala was talking to. It's us who had the writing system that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave us the writing system to put down his words, what he wanted, the creation. I gave you the monolithic Tawheed, we know in Arabic language, Tawheed, last week when I told you, he said, God is one and only. This was written 3,000 years before the Bible. Subhanahu wa Ta'ala was talking to us. But what happened was the Jews who became the Jews and Hebrews squashed that and said it was them who received this revelation. Yes, Moses received the revelation. He was given a job to do. But a lot of things that were attributed to him was not the case. This is why the Old Testament, as we know today, has a lot of discrepancies in it. I don't have time today to go into it, but Deuteronomy 34:6 is one of them. How could somebody be dead and then turn back around and write one more additional book? You cannot do it. I mean, you just cannot. If I died today, how can I just walk up and start to write another book 3 days later? You cannot. See? So this is some of the discrepancies that we start to find. And we know now that when you turn around and discover documents that mirror the documents you find in the Bible that was written 2,500 years before, 3,000 years before, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Black Muslim Jews in Africa should have closer time. Yes. And this is what I was trying to say. Because, yes, my dear brother, this is the case. We should. Because we are related. And I know the problem that we have is no different than what we have in Islam. Because when people, our black brothers, see the modern quote unquote Arab today, they see one Lebanon, Jordan, they see white skin, and they discriminate against us. They come to West Africa, the Lebanese especially, they come and they treat us like dirt. So we have a block, and we say we can't, no, this is not, I have nothing to do with this man. But the original Arabs were black. We know this. See, same now we know with the Jews and Hebrews. Either way you turn, if the Europeans coined the term Jew and Hebrew for the black tribes who left Egypt to go into Europe, but the real Jews were the Limba people, they're still black. So either way you turn, you go to the left, they were black. If you go to the right, they were black. So you can't get past that. And the Europeans, okay, who converted to Judaism, who left Europe into the Middle East, still adopted the names of their black brothers, who some they intermarried with, because some do have this priestly gene, but many of the Jews have African heritage, Akan, Ga, Igbo, Yoruba, Mende, Mendinka, because of the African tribes that went into Europe, married with white women, okay, we know this, produced children, and they carried the names Barco, okay? And we know the name in Barkowitz in Europe because they changed, they put the suffix, they put wits to it, okay, to cover the African ancestry. Netanyahu, who's running havoc in Israel and Gaza today, where we got Africans in West Africa sitting with his name. And we have two ethnic groups under the Akan with the name Netanyahu, okay? They're separated. When they made their alliance, they became what? Netanyahu. Brothers, it's fascinating. See? And you should not have a block. When your black brother says, I'm a Jew, I'm Hebrew, you should not get mad at him. If you're a Muslim, or even if you're a Christian, you should not get mad at him because he is in your family tree. We know that. See, we know that. The Limba people who have the rights, the quote unquote Jewish rights, okay, you know, their practices and so forth and so on, they're black people, right? They're black. And the modern Jews today still have adopted many of those things. In West Africa today, we have Hebrews that our author was talking about today, that they still have the same customs that was way back in ancient Egypt. The evidence, brothers and sisters, is overwhelming. Egypt is ours. The Jews and Hebrews are our people. We're not talking about those that we see today in Israel. We're not talking about those, even though they have your names there in West Africa. Okay, our brothers, they have those names. They still have those names. We know that. They still have the name Barkowitz, Netanyahu. There's a whole series of these names. I gave you some earlier. And Africans have the name. How can we have this coincidence? How can a white man who's a Jew there in Egypt have the same name as a black man, coal black in color, who's living in Ghana, or he's living in Togo, or he's living in Nigeria, or in the Gambia, and he's a Jew, and he has the same name. He has the same name, Barco. Okay, I mean, how? Because they had to come from the same stock. How? See, this is what I'm talking about. All of this, brothers and sisters, is fascinating. I want to give you something. I will close here. 234 here. We know here about I told you about when the Jewish scientist was running around for over a decade looking for the quote unquote Jewish priestly gene. They couldn't find it in Europe. Couldn't find it. They couldn't find it in the Middle East. As you heard me talk the other day, someone told them, two brothers, a Jewish scientist and a black scientist, African, told them, you need to come to Africa and start testing people to the south, because we have one group that have the quote unquote Jewish rights. They practice Judaism and so forth and so on, okay? They tested them and found a priestly gene among them. And when they began to talk to them, they said the genetic discovery of the Limba people, a Bantu-speaking people of Southeast Africa, whose traditions state that a leader named Buba led them out of the Middle East, okay, and Egypt in ancient times. The story of these people also shows that they lived in Judea, as we know today, and in ancient times in the geographical region we know in modern day Yemen. Now, brothers and sisters, if you look at that guy and he starts, you see, you know what's happening in Israel. You see with the black Jews, even the Falasha from Ethiopia and black Jews from West Africa, the black Jews who are there in the United States, they discriminate against them and say that they're not the real Jews. Brothers and sisters, they are not the real Jews. They are converts to Islam. I mean, converts to Judaism. Yes, they took the black African names who they don't want to admit, but now the evidence is clear. They still have African tribal names. We know that. And now we have the scientific proof, and they did the genetic study and found out that the real Jewish people who practice the real Jewish rites are the Limba people. And their traditions tell you they were there in the Middle East. Very fascinating. Very, very fascinating, brothers and sisters. And matter of fact, let me go back to something here. I want you to look at, again, this Jewish map, brothers and sisters, because I want you to see this again. And I want to go over this so those who make me confused what I was talking about. You see here, the Africans left ancient Egypt. The Akan, the Ga, there's Hausa, there's many different African tribes. They went across, they left Egypt because now the Africans begin to go. You remember this, they begin to go. They went into Iran, they went into India. As we know, they went into the ocean. We know the Andaman Islands. I told you about the black people I saw when I was in Thailand in 1997. I saw these black people, and they were from the Andaman Islands. The Jews left in the blue. They went into Europe. The Europeans found them. They didn't know what to call them. They spoke a different language. They looked different. They were practicing, African traditional things. So they called them Jews. This is why the name is not right. They called our black Africans who were Akan, came out of Egypt. They called them Jews. So what happened? The descendants of those who were in Europe intermarried with some whites. They're Tubal, the Europeans. They continue to keep the Hebrew and Jew title. Now they went in the green. They made their way back from Europe, back into Egypt. Okay, back into Egypt. When the Exodus occurred, some went back into the Middle East, yes, but they went where? To North Africa, they went to West Africa, and down to the South and Southeast Africa. That's how we got the Limba people, because we know the Limba people now. We found that who they were, who carries this priestly gene. See, so, and I'll give you another thing here, brothers, and then I have, because I got to be long today because I wanted to get this. I have an obligation to give you this information, brothers and sisters, because you guys, you are you guys are excuse me here, you guys, my brothers and sisters, and as an elder, it's my responsibility to give you this information, what I uncover here. I may take a lot of heat for it, but I must give you this because why? You are the future. I'm 70 years old now. You guys are my future. Now, you guys have the information that was denied you. So you have this information, you start to pass it on to your children. When the children start encountering things about the Jews and Hebrews, they'll know exactly what happened, how people became Jew and Hebrew. We understand this. I know you can understand that, especially if you get Gary Greenberg's book, which I put in the chat there. You should be able to use that. Get that book. You can get it online. You can review it. You can rent it out online. You can read it. It's very fascinating. But I wanted to give you something about Hitler. Hitler wrote a book. Okay, 21. Hitler wrote a book. And we're not going to glorify him. That's not what I'm doing here. The Europeans knew that they were deceived. They knew that, okay? They knew that. And So he wrote a book talking about the Jews who are now white there in Europe. And he didn't like the mixing. One of the reasons why he wanted to kill them is because because the the olive colored, black hair Jew was taking many of the Tubab women as wives, girlfriends, so forth. He was a purist. He didn't, we know the story about Hitler. He didn't like that. And you know that when he went on the killing campaign, he killed black Africans too. You know that. That's right. Because black Africans were also, who were known as Jews and Hebrews at that time as well, he took them and murdered them as well. But he told here in his book, I got to read this to you, brothers and sisters, this to show you the magnitude of what has happened about all the killing in order to hide the African heritage, or those who knew they hate. That's why the Europeans have a hard on for the Jews today, because they knew they deceived them about the Bible, because they learned now that the real Bible, the Africans had it 2,000 years before. They just took it and renamed it. They knew of this deception, and this is what caused them to have problems. Why Subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry with them also in the Quran. He wrote here, he says, this is Hitler. The black-haired Jewish youth lies in wait for hours on end, satanically glaring and spying on unsuspicious girls, talking about white women in Europe. Have we heard this before? Remember in the United States, what they did to black people? And whom he plans to seduce and adulterated her blood, meaning the mixing, remove her from the bosom of her own people. Then he says the Jews were responsible for bringing Negroes into Rhineland. This is Hitler. He knows the real history of who the Jews really were. He wrote about this. Again, he says the Jews were responsible for bringing Negroes into Rhineland with with the ultimate idea of bastardizing the white race, what they hate, and thus lowering the cultural and political level so that the Jew might dominate. Because he knew the Jews to be black people. And make it further. Hitler wrote also, before he went on this genocide, he killed black Africans. I just gave you what he talked about. He said that the Jews, because he knew the Jews at the time to be black people, even though many were white, but still black Jews still lived in Germany. He said here, Jews were responsible for bringing Negroes, into Germany and in Europe in particular. Then he goes in and talks about that. He says that here, that he said, what is most intriguing about that they translate Nazi massacres of blacks and Jews is that no one has dared to reveal that the Nazis also massacred black Africans alongside massacre of Jewish people, because the black Africans who were with the Jewish people were Jews too. They were some of the original Jews who the Europeans coined as Jew. They knew that these Jews who were in Europe, who you've seen pictures of many, you see today, the white Jew, even though he's white, now a lot of it's changed, many of them have pronounced features. The nose, the lips, you know that. And if you look at many of the white Jews who have these real Jewish features, we know, many of them, black hair, olive color complexion, pronounced features and so forth and so on, right? When they marry black people, look at their children. Look at the children of a black man who married to a Jewish woman, a modern day Jew, and look at the black man who marries an English woman. The children are not the same, because the Jewish person, Hebrew person he married are closer to him racially than the English woman is. Hitler knows that. This is what he's talking about. That's why he talked about this. Then Hitler said, I'm going to give you a chance. I'll let you migrate to Uganda, because the British agreed to take in the Jews at the time. because he said, your heritage is African. You go back to Africa to live. This is what Hitler said. And many Jews did go back to Africa and live. And there was a story, there's a movie about that. There's one sister, she talked about her legacy, how her family left out from Germany. They were not assassinated and put in concentration camps. Those who refused to leave, well, you know what happened. Black Africans who were Jews also died alongside there, and they stopped that. Why? They didn't want you to know about that, because they didn't want you to know the angle of the Black Jewish connection, because the Black people were the original Jews. This is why the Jews, if you look at the pictures of Jews way back, when they mix with Black Africans, the Khan people, the God people, the Hausa and the Igbo people who went into Europe, you look at the Jew, he was white man, but his hair and facial features were different, because you could tell the mixture. Look at the pronounced features of many of the Jews, and look at the man of the Englishman or Irishman or a man from Norway. It's not the same. Look at the children of the Jew and African, or with African American. Look at that child, that daughter, and look at the daughter of a Black man, African man, or Black or African American married to an English woman. Different. Because the Jews are closer to us racially, even though they became white over centuries, they still have significant African blood in them. That's why the children look the way they look. Hitler knew this. He told you to leave. He said, I want you to go back to Africa. That's where you belong. That's where your heritage is. He knew this, and many Jews did. They went back, and to the credit of the British took them in and put them in Uganda to save them. See, so we know that's fact, and you guys do your research on this. It's very interesting. But Hitler wrote this book, and he talked about how he had to get rid of the Jewish people. And you heard what he said. He said that he was mad at the Jews also, because he said they were responsible for bringing Negroes. Why? Because the Negroes, the Jews, even though they've been white in olive color, but they still were Jews along with their Black brother. At that time, they were not discriminated, not like it is today in modern times now. In those times, they were a unit. This is why the Black brothers died in the gas chambers and the concentration camps, along with their white Jewish brothers now who are now turned white. This is a fact, brothers and sisters. They killed thousands upon thousands of Black African Jews as well. And we know this for a fact, but it's been hidden from history because they didn't want you to tie the Jewish people in with Black people. So we know that. So this, I'm hoping, brothers and sisters, may be mundane for some of you. You may not say, well, so what? And that's okay. But I'm giving those who's interested in learning the true history. Or should I say during the early time in Egypt? Maybe let me look at here. Okay, I'm sorry. The 4 books, the Quran, the Gospel was lost, hidden, or changed. Yes. Then could we guess the comments? Yes, it was. All of these, all books, all the books were brother Shahid. I gave you the names like Lamentations. You look in the chat, Kweko Pra Saba. That's the name, but it was changed to Book of Lamentations because when they translated the documents, this is the name they gave it. I gave you the name of what the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, which we know Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the true story to our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, which they don't have. Okay, we know that that our brothers, the Kemites, did not have all of the story of Joseph, as we know. Okay, because a lot of documents we know we don't have it because they were destroyed. But we now know that these books, except the Quran is the one that was given divine revelation. We also can say that the religious texts that were given to the ancient Kemites, the original Akan people, God people, and so forth and so on, they were divine revelations. because how could they come up with the Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave them the notion of who he was? He gave them Tawheed. They wrote all of this in the documents 3,000 years before the Bible was compiled. The Quran is different because Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave us a prophet. We have documentation on him. What has happened with the Bible and all that? Where are these books? Where are all of these people who they talk about? Because it's been corrupted. In order to hide the truth, it's been corrupted. And Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is angry in the Quran against the Jews for corrupting his word. But now we know that the Jews that we thought were the chosen people is not them. The Africans that were encamped had to be the chosen one because Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave them Tawheed first. And they wrote this in their documents. And it was translated. God is one. Okay? He's not begotten. There's a whole series of these things that were written that our black Jewish brothers who came back to Egypt took the documents, translated them, and now said that the revelation was given to them, when in fact it wasn't. This is what has happened, brothers and sisters, on this. Judas is it? Okay. Abraham, he was not. He was part of, again, the Akan people. Because we have this name, and again, if you look at the hieroglyphics, we have the writings Abraham. It's two words. That's right. See? So we know that. Oh boy, this is really. Abraham translates to father of black people. Yes, because if you look at the Quran too, there's a passage, remember, in I can't think of it now. I had it here. I got it here somewhere where, yeah, Subhanahu wa Ta'ala here talks about here out of black mud. Now that's interesting, isn't it? See, out of black mud. This is something too that is very interesting to say the least. And okay, I'll walk in the garden. I would say that walk that's passed through turn culture due to people acting out natural ways. So messages are sent down to correct. Well, yes, we have a whole series because the creation was given to the African people. We don't have all the documents because many of the documents were destroyed. But we have a creation story that the Africans were given well before the quote unquote Jews received it. Well before Moses received his revelation. We know this. See, so this is again some of the how you doing, my dear brother? Thank you for showing up. This is some of the difficulties that we have of trying to get to the bottom of the real story of the Bible. We have 3/4 of it now, but a lot of the documents, because the Roman Church decided enough is enough. They went there and slaughtered in 391 the Africans in Egypt. Alexander killed all the scribes, so they could not talk anymore. Burned all the documents, who they thought they burned all the documents. Took down the buildings with the hieroglyphics on it to again hide the things that they found out, that the Christian religion was actually created in Egypt. See, we know that. And so they hid this, but then we start to find these documents many centuries later, and we had them deciphered, and now the scientists were just dumbfounded. They found the Book of Lamentations under the name of Hueco Pra-Seba. Okay, that's just one of them. They found Psalms in another name. And many of the Psalms that were given, they have identical writings that preceded it over 2,000 years ago. See, so all of this evidence, brothers and sisters, and I'm going to give you this, and then I'm going to ask a few more questions, and I'm going to have to just get out of here, because I'll be getting more and more of this. I'll give you tidbits of information as we give this. you know, someone's going to ask me too, but I'll get this about the language a little bit more. I gave you a little bit today about the names, but I'm going to get into that more in another period. But I want to give you something here, page 298. Okay. Boy, we got. They should not even be working this late out here on the street and near the house here. They shouldn't be working this late. Now, I want to give you something here, brothers and sisters, and I will have to close. Here, Greenberg's talking about his findings, and this is findings also of my African brother, my brother here who's passed on from Ghana, who also wrote a book about the Africans. The so-called patriarch people that left ancient Egypt in biblical Exodus came from the Akan tribe and the Kwahu tribe of ancient in the Middle East. The patriarch carried Akan names: Tana, Abraham, Jacob. These are the names they found in the Egyptian documents well before the Bible was created. From these names, it's evident these people were Akan, therefore black people. The fact that these people were black is supported by the important genetic discovery of the Limba tribe and lived in Judea, which talked about that. I revealed that the so-called patriarchs of the Ephraim people, this is the name now. I didn't want to get into that because I want to, because it would be confusing, but I have to, because I mentioned the word. The Ephraim is the name that the African people who many different ethnic groups left Egypt. Remember the map I showed you, to go into Europe. They called themselves Ephraim, A-F-R-I-M. I'll write it in here, A-F-R-I-M. Okay. This is what they call themselves. But the Europeans called them Jews. You see the confusion? Now, the so-called patriarchs of the Ephraim people that left ancient Egypt into the Exodus were the Akan people because they carried Akan names. I gave you names: Barko, Netanyahu. Those names like that are all West African names. Again, how can you have West Africans who have nothing to do with the so-called Jews that you know today how can Jews who are white today have the same names as the black African, our brothers living in West Africa? Huh? Tribal names. Netanyahu. Okay, this too. And when they were fighting, they came together, they became Netanyahu. We have people with this name. We have people who are named Barko. That's the name that still Jews have today. How's the coincidence? And we have over hundreds of these names of Jews that black Africans have this name. Now, I'm going to get, because there's a lot of this information here, but okay. Now, they show here, I showed that the Akan people that lived in the geographical area of biblical canon, because when the Akan and all the African tribes begin to go north, now we start to uncover something. They were also the Nzimwa people, the Ahanta people, the Ewe people, the Ga people in the geographical that we know geographical area known today was the GR. All these ancient people live today with the Akan people in Ghana. So all of these names you still find them in Ghana in particular, and Togo as well. You'll find this. This is, powerful evidence. And again, all of these things were written in documents before the Bible was even comprised. This is what makes it very interesting. He goes on to talk about Abraham. The ancient Ephraim people took the culture and religious practice from the ancient Egyptians, because when they left, they had the culture. This is why the Europeans were confused. When the Ga, the Akan, the Ewe people, they gave a list here of the Ahanta people and others, the Igbo, all of them went into Europe, right? They had a culture, and they did not understand the language that these people now, as a unit, call themselves Afrim people. See, Afrim people, but the Europeans call them Jews. See, so this is, again, brothers and sisters, very, very, very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. I say Russians question the spread through. Yeah, okay, brother, but we're not talking about them, okay? Because I gave you what, if you came late, I can understand. Perhaps you didn't listen to the rest of this. I gave you evidence talking about the so-called white Jews. The so-called white Jews were those who adopted Judaism, and many intermarried with Black African tribes who were in Europe. I gave you that. The Europeans called the Black Africans Jews and Hebrews. The African tribes who went into Egypt called themselves Afrim. I gave you that name here in the chat. See, so yes, we have a lot of variations. Jews, we know, went everywhere. We know they're all the way across Europe. Here, we're trying to show you how they became Jews and what happened, who the real Jews were. The real Jews weren't Russian. The real Jews were Black. See, so again, I don't want any of us to take us away from the fact of the Limba people, because the Limba people have the real Jewish genes, and Jewish scientists found that out. See, so we should concentrate on that. I don't know. You know what, my dear brother, I don't know what you're talking about. XZ. You know what? I'm not gonna. I don't know what you're talking about here. I don't know what you're talking about here. I'm removed him. This silliness like this with this type of thing here, we don't need this type of thing. We got intelligence people here. We don't need to be playing games with the trolls who put stuff in XZ. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. I don't know what he's saying. But oh yeah, thank you, my dear brother, for greeting. Again, brothers and sisters, you heard me talk about many times. We have brothers now starting to do this. You know, we have our traditions, right? We should keep our traditions. We always speak to one another. If you are Hebrew and Jew, this is your nation of your religion, you should be saying Shalom Aleichem. If you're Muslim, Salam Alaikum or something. If whatever, if you are Fulani, Anjarama, okay? I mean, you know, any of the names that we dream, because this is our custom. And I showed you that even the ancient African Jewish customs, even Jesus, he used Shalom. Every time he greeted his brothers, Shalom. When he left, Shalom Aleichem. We should be doing this practice. That's how we keep the love for one another. Because if we should have that kind of respect and love and respect for each Black person, we should have that. See, that's why you always notice when I address, I always say salam. See, because this is the way our people were taught in Fudi language, Anjarama. See, you see, this is the way we should be doing that. Use your heritage, learn. Yes, you and learn the language. I'm trying to learn the Fudi language. I speak Arabic, which still is an African dialect, but I want to learn really. You heard me say the Messina dialect. I want that bad, but I don't know how I'm going to find it. But I'm looking for it. I'm hoping I can find this person who does speak that, because that's the dialect I really want. Because there's so much historical things to this particular dialect of Fudi. Messina, I just, that's my baby. I want that one. I want to learn that. How you doing, my dear brother? Thank you for showing up. Thank you. Question: is it against the biblical and Quranic law for men to have long hair, such as Afro locks? No, I don't think so. No. Now, in Islamic law, we have some prohibitions about hair, because you know, Islam is the cleanliness. Okay, how, you know, we must clean ourselves. We had people in the time of the Prophet ﷺ who had longer hair. Yes, we had that, but we have regulations about beard and everything and cleanliness. We want to make sure we keep ourselves clean. Like the private part, we're supposed to every 30 days or so, 30 to 40 days, we supposed to remove the hair and the genital area, because cleanliness, purification is a must. And also the biblical, which the Christians and Jews don't do today. You're supposed to have ablution, because if you look at the documents, we had ablution before we went to the synagogue. People cleaned themselves, all right? But they stopped to do that because the Europeans took hold of Judaism and Christianity and changed the documents. But Islam, we have purification and so forth. But the locks, there are some scholars who are talking about these, that we should not have that, especially like the locks. But again, the Prophet ﷺ, he had hair similar to that. We had Black Africans that had certain types of locks. So there's a lot of description. There's a lot of scholars that are in disagreement about that, and I'll leave it at that, because no one has actually made a good ruling. I heard one ruling over here, then I heard another ruling. So it's kind of iffy. I would go by what you find in the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, who talks about hair, beard, and so forth. And this is what I would go by. If I was a man, I would not have my hair real long. Why? Because it has a tendency, you can't clean it as well. If you put it up in a bun, now you're mimicking a woman. See, because this is what women do. Men don't do this. See, so this is, again, I don't want to get into the Sharia law, but this is some of the things that we're talking about, and it's very touchy issue, because we have modern times today, and we have scholars who differ on this. We have brothers that have locks and so forth. They look like women. That is frowned upon in Islam. We know that men cannot mimic women. Women cannot mimic men. If you are wearing something that mimics a woman, throw it off. If you have braids with beads in it that make you look like a woman, you need to cut that, because Subhanahu wa ta'ala is clear about that. And the Prophet ﷺ is clear about you going to the hellfire if you mimic. You are a man, you act as a man, you don't mimic a woman. And a woman, you're a woman. You don't mimic a man. It's totally forbidden. It sends you to the fire. Yes, we're learning together. Yes, we are. That's the main thing. We're learning together. Men are supposed to keep beard, of course, according to yes, they're supposed to, and Hebrews are practicing. Yes, they're supposed to, according to the laws. That's right. We have laws. We've had others who made ijtihad about the beard. If it gets past, I forgot, the fourth finger, you can trim it down some. Others said, it's iffy about that, but you can trim it. But all of us, we know, should have a beard if you can grow it. Okay, because some of our African brothers don't have that hair on their face. They just don't. It's just the heritage. They don't have that. But we should have a beard. This marks the thing of a Muslim. We know that. Right. A lot of the scholars associate locks with Rastafari. Yes. And the Prophet ﷺ had long hair as well. Yes, he had long hair. It just grew down to the shoulders. Yes, because you have cleanliness problems. And there's things like this. And when the hair begins to get real down the back, you start to mimic a woman, don't you? Because now you have to get your hair, you got to do this, you got to fold it, and this is a woman, okay? And you should not. If there anything that's going to make you mimic a woman, stay away from it. Yes, but do you understand why they shaved? Because in Kemp, it was a cultural thing in Kemp, but also you got to remember something. It's a dry, hot climate as well, and they had problems with lice and with bugs. So they have a tendency to shave so that way lice and other things cannot cling onto their bodies. We know that. So we read documents about they doing these type of things like this for cleanliness. See, so that way because lice and fleas, they cling to hair. You know that. So the ancient Kemites, this is what they did. They were under the Nazareth, covenant, yes, yes. And, all of the things that's been changed around, I don't know too much about a lot of the new rules because even the Jews today, they don't practice, except the Orthodox Jews. They practice what was given, that they understand. But a lot of the modern Jews don't, just like the modern Muslims today. They don't act and dress or even associate themselves too much with what is supposed to be according to the Sunnah. They say they're modern. They live in modern times. They said they become Muslim only at prayer. After prayer, they go back to be disbelievers. Many of them said they don't need to pray until this day, and they start to act all kind of different ways to get away from the order of Allah and the order of our Prophet. We have problems in that area, and the Jews did too. But there was a predated and led to that one. Yes. But brothers and sisters, I'm not going to get into the things about a lot of the cleanliness, about the hair and all that, because that's immaterial. Those are issues, because today even the Jews don't agree upon that, because you have the Orthodox Jews. They say, look, we're not following what Moses has did. The modern Jews said, look, we'll follow some of that, but we're modern. They have their conflicts. The Muslims have that. We have the Muslims who, quote unquote, fundamentally take what Subhanahu wa ta'ala has said and what his prophet has said, والسلام, and go by the Sunnah. The modern Muslims say, look, we live in modern times. We have cars, we have cell phones, we have women walking all over the place, we have this and that. So I'm a Muslim, but I'm going to use modern technology. The Jews have that problem today. Look, Israel is a secular state. It's not a Jewish state. Yes, by heritage and culture and language, but look, it's still more of a secular state. And most Muslim states are not, they're Muslim by culture and language and all that, but they're what? Modern, and they're secularists. See, we all have this problem now. We all. Yes. Please subscribe to our brother and check him out and get with him and and support your brother and his, because he gives a lot of history classes as well, and it's good for us to have that. Dear brothers, there's a lot of stuff I did not cover today. I want to put this up here again. The documents we know, we're talking about, that they preceded the Bible by 3,000 years. The text scientists uncovered a God. I gave you this stuff today, and the King's List. The King's List is where you find the creation and all that. Subhanahu wa ta'ala had to talk to us first, 3,000 years before the Bible was created. Even Moses he studied in those mystery schools, so he learned about creation. He learned about Tawheed. We know that. See, and that means the African brothers had this first, well before these quote unquote Africans who became Jews and Hebrews had that. See, we know that. Religious documents and history of creation is part of, as I said, 3,000 years before, and we had all of this well before the Bible. That's why I'm saying, brothers and sisters, Subhanahu wa ta'ala chose us. We were first to have all of these teachings well before the Jews had it. Well before they have, and then they corrupted it. That's why Subhanahu wa ta'ala was mad with them. But we had it. 5 books written by, okay, this is, again, see, this is why we have problems, brothers and sisters, why I was saying, and I'm getting long here, I know, the 5 books written by Moses, alayhi salatu wasalam, according to Deuteronomy 34:6. How can you die and then write the last remaining book? You understand what I mean? The scientists found this discrepancy as well. There's many. The Nabi declared his death and burial site. Afterwards, he would write additional books. How? It just, you see what I mean? Because when you steal something and you corrupt and you get something that's not your own, you have to keep messing with it because it's not your own. And this is why the Bible has 140 versions of it, because it's not authentic. It's authentic with the ancient Egyptians who had it, who wrote in their mystery systems, yes, and in the King's List, it was authentic. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this guidance. But when our African brothers became Jews and Christians, when they went into Europe, they had changed and came back into Kemet. They were not the same Akan people anymore, or God people. They had totally changed. They were black, but they were not. Their ways and means were different. And they're more akin now to the Greeks because they had been living among the Europeans now for centuries. You understand now, brothers and sisters? So when they went back into Kemet, they were now Jews and Hebrews, because that's what the Europeans called them. but they were a Khan, they were Ga, they were Igbo, yes, and they were Hausa and Mende, but they were Jews and Christians. They were Jews and Hebrews. This is what has happened. When the Europeans found that the documents of the Old Testament wasn't written by the Jews, this is why they persecuted the Jews in Europe, because they found the Old Testament wasn't written by them. It was written by their Black African brothers, again, over 2,000 years before. Then they got into the act and wanted to corrupt the Bible by adding a New Testament. And that's why the New Testament is filled with discrepancies. You have Jesus, the Lamb, says in the New Testament, I'm here to enforce the Torah, okay, not to tear it down. Then you go further into the New Testament, it tells you you can eat pork. Now, under the Torah, under the Sharia of the Torah, you cannot eat pork. And there's other sacraments that you cannot do. But the New Testament says that, that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave authority now that you can eat anything. See, these are discrepancies why the Bible is deadly. And it's just too many discrepancies in it to make it very difficult. And the New Testament would be the basis, which is true, the basis of the new Eurocentric Christianity, because the Europeans changed the meaning of the Bible. They changed the meaning of the documents that were written in Egypt. They changed all that, which the modern Christians follow. They don't. The Christians, they don't follow the Old Testament. They follow the New Testament. The Jews don't follow the New Testament. They follow the Old Testament. You see the problem we have there? Again, how is it that ancient kept religious thoughts, concepts, and stories mirror the Bible? Again, brothers and sisters, I'm just rephrasing. How? How the documents were written 2,000 years before find its way into the Bible? If the Bible was revealed to the Jews as they said it was, then how did somebody have the same revelations 2,000 years before? Why you didn't admit that? But you didn't. They took, our Black Jewish brothers took those documents and made it their own and said they received these revelations when in fact they didn't. And the European scholars began to find that out, and that's why they created the New Testament and they stopped to follow the Old Testament. This is a proven fact. The diabolical Hitler knew of the Jewish history. It was tied to Africa, and I told you the story about that. He gave them a chance. He told many, you go and settle in Uganda and Kenya, and the others who stayed were eventually murdered, that, and massacred. We know what happened there. I don't need to get into that tragedy. Our Jewish brothers have failed to explain their rightful origin. Today, if you ask the Jews, they'll give you a lot of different things because they themselves know that they had Black history, but they don't want to admit that. Look how white they are in Israel today. They look like no different than any white man in America, Tuba American, anywhere in Europe. They look the same. You can't tell the difference between the two because the real Jewish heritage is not with them. That's why when they tested them, they tested their ancestry. Their ancestry came back to Europe and some of the African tribes. It didn't come back to the Limba people, which they said 3.5% of them had this gene, but most of them don't. They're pure Europeans now. That's just what but they converted to Judaism. Nothing wrong with that. No different than me. I came to Islam. Just because I wasn't born in the Middle East, that doesn't mean that I'm less than. I'm still a Muslim. The Europeans converted to Judaism, they're Jews. No doubt about that. But for them to say they are the chosen people, they're not. We've proven that here tonight. You should understand that. And what is their language? Jewish surnames were transposed to hide their African history. I gave you Burkel. They changed it to Berkowitz. I gave you all these names. There's many. Archon. Okay, we have Africans who sit in West Africa today with the same names as our Jewish brothers sitting in Israel and Europe and America. They have the same name. See, because they took those names, the European converts took the names of those Jews who they called Jews, who the Africans called Afrim people. They called themselves Afrim people, but the Europeans in Europe called them Jews and Hebrews. And when they came into the Middle East and into Egypt, they had the same names. And those tribal names are still with the Jews today, as with our brothers in West Africa. It's a fascinating topic and a fascinating history. How is jurisdiction or founded among, and as you heard me say, how's Netanyahu? How is some black man sitting in the two ethnic groups among the Khan people with the name Netanyahu? How, brothers? Please, now you understand what I'm talking about? Why I said to you why it's difficult to do this, because there's been a lying lore for centuries to deny the African excellence and our history in this. We were the original. We were the original, and we received the revelation from Subhanahu wa first. That's why we wrote the documents on Tawheed, on the oneness of Allah. We wrote that. We wrote it. We had it first. Well before anyone had any writing systems, we wrote those documents. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the Tawheed. He gave it to us. And then we begin to write stories of in the history. Okay, you know the great Egyptian. I'll talk about him in another. I won't mention his name now because it adds to the confusion. He gives you the history. But I told you about the Akan names that we found of the patriarch fathers, Abraham. Okay, Saki, all of these names like this, Kabul, all of these names like this were found in the ancient Egyptian documents, but they were included into the Bible. It's very, very interesting. After Jerusalem migrated, as you heard me say, they migrated to Europe. They became known as Jews and Hebrews. But the Africans who went into this region called themselves Ephraim. See? But the Europeans called them Jews. You see the confusion, brothers and sisters? So they accepted that term Jew, and they went back into the Middle East, now being mixed, okay? Stayed in the Middle East, went into Egypt, we know today, as Jews, when they were Ephraim people. That's why whole thing, it takes a lot of understanding. Okay, we got some questions here more, and after that, we'll I appreciate you all. Yes, brother, that's right. Bob was telling the truth. Yes, this is a very hard-hitting thing. A lot of people be very upset with me because, of course, we have Christians, African Americans, who just cannot see anything past the whiteness of it. They feel that the whiteness of it is the salvation for them. It's not. I gave you something out for you to do your research. Everybody has to look in the chat and get Greenberg's book, The Moses Mystery. You got to have that if you're interested. He's a Jew, and he wrote about this fallacy that happened. How we duped history. The Europeans found it out and began to persecute the Jews because they say, you lied to us. You didn't create the Bible. The black Africans who were sitting in Egypt created the Bible first. That's why the Jews began to persecute them. You heard what Hitler said. He knew of their history, and he said, look, you are black people. And he's mad because the Jews now were olive complected, light, very white skinned, olive complected, and some were black. They were black African Jews who lived, because they were Jews, right? They lived among one another. Hitler said, I didn't like it. Why? Because the German women were marrying them, and he couldn't stand it no more. That's why he wrote in his book about them, making the German woman unclean. So when he went to go kill, he said, look, I'm going to give you black people a chance to leave to go to Africa, which many did. And they ended up in Uganda. The British, to their credit, saved them and let them come, and they gave them safe haven into Uganda. But Hitler's knew of their black heritage beforehand, and a lot of people don't know about that, and they don't talk about Hitler's book either, because he talked about their black heritage. It's very interesting. This is why the rulers of Kemp were specific as to who they married. Yes, the kings either were from the south or their wives were. Yes, because when we know that many of the pharaohs, many of them took on different ethnic groups. We know that because if you look at the king's list, they're not all in the Khan names. Some are Ga, some are even Fufudi. We know this, ancient Fufudi dialect. We know some of the kings had other names, but they all were black Africans. We know that. We know that. And we know that the black Africans, again, got together, many ethnic groups, now under one banner, and many left. That's how they ended up going into Egypt. I mean, into Europe, and there they called themselves a Afrim people, very close, almost like Africa. A Afrim. They called themselves a Afrim people. This is what they wrote. A Afrim people. That's what they were. That's what they called themselves. The Europeans called them Jews. Very interesting. How do we contact you, Elder? Oh, yes. Yeah. Some of you, I know you guys, most people don't use Scape, but you can write me here. Suyani okay, where's Outlook? Yeah. Outlook.com. I think this is it. Yeah. There you go, right there. Yeah, you can get a hold of me there. This is who I am, and that's my email. I don't like to use email as much because mine is compromised a lot. I use Scape because I found it to be more secure, far more secure. But a lot of people don't know how to use Scape well, and a lot of times it's very confusing. I had to learn how to really work it, but now since I've learned how to do it, I've seen all the advantages to it, and that's why I use it mostly for my communication, pictures, everything, because it's very secure. I have no problem when I send something out, that person gets it. When I receive it, because they have their own server, so that way I have the security, because I'm still living in Africa, and we have people under heavy surveillance like me. So a lot of times we have documents taken from me. I have people write me and they say, "Hey man, you never answered me," but I didn't know that I got it, but they took it out. Because my enemy are doing that. Believe me, they're doing this type of thing. Yes, the great Kings Fuller. I don't know, Kings. I don't know what you're talking about, my dear brother. You're gonna have to elaborate on that. I wish African countries could come together and help Sudan. Yes, and a lot of Egyptians are yes. We hope that. Because what's happening in Sudan is a tragedy. I was in Sudan in 2008, 2009, and it was starting to change there. Brothers told me it was changing for the worse. And when I left, and then of course you know what's happened, it got to the point where it led to what we have today. And again, the problem in Sudan, you heard me talk with this class, again, is the ethnic, who is Arab. This is the key, again, in Sudan. As you heard me say, anybody who wants to understand Africa, you must understand the ethnic, okay, the ethnic people and the languages and the culture and so forth, and who they're aligned with. That's how Africa still is run, because you need to understand the people in Sierra Leone. Who are the ones you talking about? Are you talking the Mende people, or are you talking about the Fuller people? See, we still have that. You still need to use that, because that's the way you can understand, because we have cultural things and so forth. We have predominant people who are living in Sierra Leone. We have people who are predominant living in Liberia. You have the Capelli people and so forth and so on. You have to have this knowledge of the ethnics, especially Sudan is no different. You got to understand the Sudan. I told you about the green and blue blacks, the Nuba people. The Nuba people are the original Nubian people that we talk about in Egypt. They are the original, and they're blue tinged to their skin, and green, blacks, very, very black. As you heard my class talking about them, they're still green and blue black today as they were then. See, they were the real original Nubian people. See, so you have to understand that in order for you to understand Africa very well, you should understand the ethnics. Like in South Africa, which I think Marcus is going to get, like in South Africa, you got to understand, you got to talk about, you got the Zulu people, but you got others too there. You got to understand what's happened and who the people are. And you have to understand the groups that are prevalent there. You got to understand that. Because in order to understand Africa, you must understand that. Because you have cultures, languages. And this is the big difference in Africa that's different than any other place in the world. When you talk about Sudan, you need to understand who is the Arabs. Who are the ones, because it's a lot of this argument now is about who is really Arab and Sudani. It's ridiculous. We know that Islam came to stop that. But this is a problem in Sudan where we're deciding who is really Arab and who is not, and if he's a Sudani Arab or not. This is the crazy issue for them to fight over. But you heard my class talk about Sudan. I gave you inference about the Fulfulde people there who speak the language, the Sudani Fulfulde dialect. It is a dialect because we have many, and you know the RSF are descendants, have full heritage. You know about that. I talk about that. And this is why the government forces told the RSF, we know your daddy. We know your daddy to be Fuller. So you're not really Sudani and Arab. See, this is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. And it's very interesting. And a lot of times it's so confusing, you got to scratch your head and you get a headache because you move this area here, it's Mende and Mendika. You move over here, it's Fuller, you know, the Capelli people. You move over here, it's Mende and Fulani people. I mean, you know what I mean? You go to the north, you go to Senegal, you got the Senegalese and the Seri people. You see, you have all this type of thing, and you have to learn it. You should have a drawing board here and say, oh, over here, these people, over here, these people. So that's how it is in there. Brothers and sisters, you know, I got to get ready to get out of here because I'm way past my time for the first evening slot. And I've been on long today. And I'm glad you guys showed up today. I'm very honored that you showed up to listen to this program. And I'm going to get more into this. I'm going to get into other sections of Egypt. But remember this, brothers and sisters, you got evidence today. Egypt is ours. Don't make no mistake about it. The original Jews and Hebrews are ours. They were black people. The revelation from Subhanahu wa Ta'ala that gave us the creation, okay? The creation and so forth. We had it first, well before the Bible was created. We know this. We have the documents and that was found that preceded the Bible. Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave us this guidance first. We had it first. He gave us Tawheed first, well before the quote unquote Jews and Hebrews got it. I explained it to you. I explained the confusion about how the Jews came about. The Africans, the God people, probably even fuller. We know the house of people, Igbo people, Mende people, they left Egypt in unison. They call themselves in a new group. They call themselves Ephraim people. They went into Europe. The Europeans encountered them. They did not know. They didn't know how to say who they were. They didn't know who they were, so they called them Jews and Hebrews. This is the confusion. So when, after centuries of being in Europe and being around Tubal, the Greeks and everybody else, right? They were more akin to them, even though they were black. They still took the title Jew and Hebrew, not Akan anymore. They came back, if you saw my map, back to the Middle East, as we understand today, back into Egypt. They encountered their black brothers again, but they were no longer Akan. They were no longer Egyptian, according to Kim. They were no more Kemites anymore. They are more akin to the Greeks and other Europeans, the Tubal. This is why they have problems. So the black brothers began to mistreat them. We know that. When the Greeks finally came in to run the show, the Greeks gave them full reign and told them, you compile a religious book for me, since you're supposed to be the chosen people. They went to the suppositories and took out the hieroglyphics and the writings and translated that and conformed the Bible. That's it in a nutshell. And we found out that the real Jewish people were the Limba people who were in the south. See, the real Jewish people. How did the Jews become white today? It's because that when the European converts to Judaism, they adopted the Akan, Ga, Igbo, Hausa names. They took those names, but they were white, yes. And some married with black people. We know that with the Friend people. They married with some of them. They were Jews now, and they adopted the religion. They left Europe into the Middle East. That's how they were white. And of course, the Romans came there, and then they also mixed with black Africans again. And this is why the Jew today, he has a heritage that's very mixed up. He has African blood, he's got European blood. But only 3.5% of them have the priestly Jewish gene, which is the Limba people in southern Africa. And this is where we have all this confusion, brothers and sisters. We have all this confusion. That's why this situation needs to have a long discussion about that. And I gave you this history today so you can understand who the Jews and Christians are. Get Gary Greenberg's book, the Moses Mystery. He explains it very well in there. This will help you to discern. He tells you that the Jews, the original Jews, were black people, not white. The white converts to Judaism, yes, and they came into the Middle East, and they're still white today because they mixed with Romans and Greeks and so forth and so on. Some mixed with black African tribes, but as the white convert Jews come into the region, the black people begin to go further south. And this is the truth about what has happened. So now you have that. They never entered into Egypt as we know today. Okay, they didn't. The black Jews who were named that entered back into Egypt. The white Jews came later, and they settled in the Middle East, and that's why we have this contention today that the Jews today that you see in Israel, they're bad. When they hear about a black man said he's this and that, they say, no, you're not an original Jew. They're not the original Jews. The black people are. And they're related to the black people in West Africa because we have West African Jews today who are descended from that, who came, the Ephraim people, and they settled, came into Egypt and went to the West Africa. We know that. So they converted to Judaism as well, and they are Hebrews and Jews. The real Jews are the Limba people to the south. It's a very long and tedious history, and this is the way it is. And he's given you a compliment. I'm not sure who you're talking about, my dear brother here. The great stuff King's full of. I'm still lost on this one. I still lost on this one. You're talking about here. Let me see this. Oh yeah, we talked about that. Okay, brothers and sisters, I must conclude here with my presentation today. And thank you for showing up, my dear brothers and sisters. I appreciate that immensely. Those who have not subscribed, please hit my subscribe button. I will cover more in depth about the Africans who wrote the Bible and the real Egyptian history, which is ours. You heard me say this slogan, Egypt is ours, it is ours. I gave you more proof today. I gave you the DNA chart showing you that the ancient Egyptians left and they were the E series of the genotype. And the E series is now prevalent in West Africa. And I told you that. And the E series is prevalent among African Americans because we are descended from West Africans. So you have this evidence again to show you that the ancient Egyptians were black because the ancient Egyptians had the E series, and the West Africans, you see here, Mende, Mendinka, and so forth, all the way down the line, the Igbo, everybody's carrying the E series. One E of this E series, all of us have it. And we know the ancient Egyptians had this same series, and that's big time proof to show you that you, brother, who's sitting in West Africa, irrespective of you Fula or if you Igbo or you Yoruba or whatever, we're all brothers. We all came out of Egypt. We should not even be fighting like we are fighting and so forth and so on. We shouldn't be doing that because we all came out of ancient Egypt. We took the English and we took the ancient Kemet writing systems and cultures and made our own. I showed you also the chair that you find in ancient Egypt that the royal class in particular used this as a sitting chair. We found this among the Khan people. We understand that today, and it was dated thousands of years ago. That's another proof. This is what they took and they used because, again, the culture, the ancient Egyptian culture, this chair here, you find it ancient. Look at many of the hieroglyphs, you'll see these chairs. This was among the Akan people for thousands of years. So I gave you that evidence. I gave you evidence of names of the Jews who we know today. Barkowitz, they changed the name to Barkowitz and so forth and so on. I gave you those names and so forth and so on. All these names, Arkoff, we have people in West Africa sitting in the name of Kofo. These are West African, again, showing that the Jews, the original Jews, were Black Africans from West Africa originally who went into Europe. This is part of the names. There's hundreds of these names, brothers and sisters, that the Jews today possess. So they still keep Black African tribal names. Barco is one of them. Famous name, Barco. Barkowitz, they changed it in Egypt, but we have Barco people today. I told you about Netanyahu. Netanyahu, we have the two Akan ethnic groups that combined to call themselves Netanyahu, okay? I told you about that. The president, the prime minister of Israel today is who? Netanyahu. Same name. So how can you, the evidence is overwhelming. It's overwhelming, brothers and sisters, that we are the ancient Egyptians and that Egypt is ours, okay? And the Jews that you know today still carry our names. They still carry our names. Fascinating, fascinating. So with that, brothers and sisters, stay tuned to the next saga here sometime this week, inshallah, bi'ifnillah. And I hope that you stay safe, and subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses all of you, and that you guys subscribe as well. And don't forget, brothers and sisters, please, you should coordinate with other brothers, and you guys start making, connections and so forth. And when you come to the show, please always greet me, greet your other brothers, because this is African custom. We're not Europeans. You understand? We're not Tubab. So if you are Hebrew, you go ahead and you say Shalom Aleichem. I accept that because that's what you are. If you're Fuller, you say Anjarama. I accept that. But you greet one another because this is the proper way to do it. I'm your elder on top of that. So you should be greeting me when you come into the chat. You should say Salam Alaikum or Shalom Alaikum or Anjarama or whatever dialect you greet, because we should respect one another, right? I do that. When I come on the chat, I always say Salam. I always give this or Anjarama or something to you, or Haba. I give you, for full words and so forth and so on like this to greet you because I have respect and love for you. That's what we're supposed to do. This is African custom. This is also Islamic custom. This is also the Judaism and Hebrewism. This is also the custom because Jesus, alayhi salatu salam, he greeted his people by saying Shalom Aleichem. When he greeted them and when he left them, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. He did the same thing. So we should keep that tradition. So with that said, brothers and sisters, I'll leave you with that. Salam Alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.